You hear the word detox, and when you think about detox in a clinical situation, what are the first compounds that come to mind for you when you think of detox? What are the primary things from an environmental point of view that you think detox? Where does your brain often go first?
There's the two sides, isn't there, Phil? So one of the ways you're going to be wanting to discuss detoxing with the patient is how do you reduce the intake of your toxins? And then you usually best to point them towards what's called a dirty dozen by the environmental working group. And then they start to become aware that fairly common foods they might be eating, like apples or grapes, are actually in the top half of the dirty dozen polluted foods, common foods. And so you want them to reduce that, and you educate them about using the vegetable washes, which is the mild detergents that you spray onto the foods before and then wash off the spray as you do. I tend to talk about that as, people say detergent on the food, and I say, oh gosh, every night you're washing your plates with detergent and then you rinse it off.
Yeah.
It's like, it's fine, don't worry.
It's also better than the alternative as well. If you'd rather not wash off pesticides, I mean, that's an interesting decision in itself,
and
right?
just to explain to them that the pesticides put on with an oily spray, so you need a detergent to pick it off again. Sometimes with some patients you have to bring up the topic of mercury in their teeth. Some people who have more than 3, pretty much they can't keep up with it. Depends on genetic predispositions, but the idea of mercury does come out of teeth into the system from the amalgams, and then going over to mercury in the seafoods. Our local seafood system is polluted, and once people get past around 3 serves per week, which is quite common in the local families, things like the sperm motility go down. Fertility in general for couples goes down. Once you do, if in the old times we used to use a fair bit of hair analysis to find out people's mercury levels, and here in Hong Kong it's about 4 times on average what it is in the States. And if you have an overseas, if you have a Shanghai client, it'll be 8 times. So Chinese in general will have a higher level than we do in Hong Kong. We have a much higher level than this in the West. So mercury is part of that background load of oxidative stress that people do carry. Especially local people, or people who love tuna, say tuna is their favourite sushi, It's like, some people love the can of tuna every second day. It's like, oops, let's measure it, and it is too high. If they have been eating seafoods recently like that, you can actually just do it as a simple blood test, and it'll be high in the blood. Usually the blood limit here in Hong Kong, I think is 10 or 11. Really you want to see it under 5. But even people just stop eating the mercury in their foods, their blood levels would drop down after about 3 to 4 months, and you did no detoxing at all. But then you could add the vitamin C, you can add the NAC, and you can also, within our ranges of products, there's the Metal X Synergy. It's one of the Designs for Health things. It's got a nice lot of products that bind the metals in the gut and help to, in a way, chelate them there and take them out the back end. So just simple things like that. But if we're talking about something like mycotoxins, so one of the key ideas you just mentioned was people's energy can become much lower when they're quite toxic. And we find that especially with mycotoxic patients who've got either an office or generally their home with a mold problem. Now, it's a really common thing. I don't know the exact percentage. The government here says 10% of buildings are water damaged. My guess is it's 3 or 4 times that. So, and then there's offices, and many of the schools are very old, and the kids are affected too. Okay, mycotoxins. Like many toxins, mercury is another good example. They tend to attack the mitochondria by oxidizing the mitochondrial membranes. Now, in the mitochondrial membranes, the complexes of the oxidative phosphorylation. That's your energy production. That's Krebs cycle in another term. All kicking off all those ATPs that you want. Now, when the mitochondria are damaged, the body actually moves to a state which can't heal itself. It just doesn't have the energy for healing. It has enough energy to keep the heart beating, your breathing, your brain functioning at half level. The majority of, or let's say, most dense area of your body for mitochondria is your brain. So, hey, guess what's going to slow down when you're toxic? And many a client sort of around their 40s, 45, something like that. There might be people who really need to have their wits about them, like hedge fund managers or something, who come along to me and say, I'm just not as sharp, the performance rubbing, what's going on? And we do these types of looking into the toxins, or occasionally jumping into a biochemic kind of a upregulation for all these systems. And bingo, literally 6 weeks later, it's like, thanks, that was fantastic, my brain's back, fabulous.
It's crazy, isn't it? And I think for some of the listeners who may have trouble with the word oxidation, go into your kitchen, chop an apple in half, and leave it on a plate for the next hour, and see what it looks like in an hour.
Okay, and if you have something like mango, do the same thing. Now, the mango won't look very aged in the hour's time because it's full of antioxidants, a colour. Whereas the centre of an apple doesn't have any antioxidants to speak of, and it rusts, it oxidizes.
So glad you picked that up. That's exactly where I was going, and I think this is where having a visual representation of what these things actually do really helps to understand sometimes the priority of caring where your environment is there. And you'd be able to comment with your experience, your vast experience about this, but I think personally I'm starting to hear from my own patients more and more that, there's a bit of mold, but I thought that was normal. And I think one of the interesting things about 2020 and how the changing situation with people working at home more is that there's a possibility that whilst their work office may be broken and now they're going home and working in a cleaner environment and feeling better at home, they may actually be going into a broken, home environment. When I say broken, I mean, more mouldy and things like that, and actually being exposed to it more, whereas, they may not have been in the past. And I think the same for their children as well, who are being schooled at home and these types of things now. And I mean, the amount of testing that's coming back is really big. But I wanted to touch on that because...
So let's just stop there for a sec, because I'll just make a comment or two. One of the ways to spot the mycotoxic patient is you're doing your good things, you've cleaned out their gut and they felt a bit better, thank you very much. These will often too be patients who've got a lot of weight that doesn't shift very well if they're older, or women who have that better adipose tissue kind of layer. But although they might not perceive it as better, but it's bigger.
Yeah, indeed.
But so back to it. The mitochondria having shut down, so they're not producing energy. So still in the liver, still in every cell in their brain, they don't yet have their health back, usually their gut, and they're not responding. And in general, it's that time you might want to think about having a look at the mycotoxins rather than, even you upregulate their detoxification in a broad sense, they don't respond unless you're very good at getting rid of the mycotoxins out of the gut. So that's worth explaining. So even, say, somebody you might have upregulated their glutathione with a vitamin C and a natto-E. I mention a natto-E because it's a better form of vitamin E. NENAC, or there's a nice formula that I use quite often called Antiox Excel by the Australian company Bioceuticals, which has got the whole chain of the antioxidants together. Maybe sometime we'll come back and talk about that, why I've used the word chain. But so you've got some upregulation of their detox, but they're still not responding. They've got their low-carb diet, they've got their gut clean, and they're still basically, not changing. So that patient is biochemically toxic, and the most common reason for it in Hong Kong anyway is to do with mycotoxins. So mold is in a lot of houses, it damages the mitochondria, people don't have the energy to heal. Okay, so you upregulate their glutathione, but so now the mycotoxins are getting eliminated with the bile into the upper digestive system. Okay, it's kind of like in our modern time, if we stuck that, toxin out through the bottom end of the gut, bingo, people would be getting better much easier. But so you're putting the toxins back into the digestive system, the assimilation system. So around it goes again. Mycotoxins particularly just reabsorb. You can put all you like out into the top end of the digestive tract, but it's back in the enterohepatic circulation. It's like you got nowhere. So you've got to do something that binds the bile. In that case, I actually do use, the originator of a lot of this mycotoxins, Thought Shoemaker, said, he stumbled into it by having given somebody bioconjugating cholestyramine. And 3 days later, they were thanking him greatly for suddenly they're feeling so much better. And that was without any antioxidants being pushed through the system. And to help, just to physically bind what comes out on a daily effort by the liver, makes a huge difference. So then you have to choose, what's your best bio-binding, option. And I'm still looking for one that isn't cholestyramine for the mycotoxin people, but they do so well on it. But there are some other things. Even the probiotic used to be called Lactobacillus sporogenes, and then they discovered it was really a bacillus, and it's got the name coagulans. But it's a spore-forming probiotic, and it actually binds the bile very well. And it's not a bad addition. It can be a way, like the cholestyramine for lowering cholesterol, this type of probiotic. So look, the key talk there is about binding mycotoxins so they come out of the bowel is a crucial element in that.